Good day, and on behalf of BJA Director Tracy Troutman at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, let me welcome you to this webinar on body-worn camera usage in correctional settings. My name is Chip Coldren. I'm the Director of the Center for Justice Research and Innovation at the CNA Institute for Public Research, the Director of Technical Assistance for the Bureau of Justice Assistance's Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program, and I will provide the introduction for today's webinar. This webinar will address the adoption of body-worn cameras in correctional settings, and especially the unique organizational and environmental factors that influence the introduction of this technology in correctional settings. This webinar has a special meaning for me, as I have been involved with body-worn camera implementation for several years now, and I think it's fascinating to look into the introduction of body-worn cameras into corrections agencies, knowing that many of them have stationary camera systems. So I think there's a lot to learn here. I also worked in a correctional facility for several years, and I welcome our colleagues from corrections who are presenting and listening today. This is another in a series of webinars sponsored by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and coordinated by CNA for the Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program. We thank the Bureau of Justice Assistance for its investment in the Body-Worn Camera Grant Program, in the Body-Worn Camera Toolkit, and in a range of technical assistance resources and opportunities for agencies implementing body-worn cameras. The Bureau supports state, county, local, and tribal agencies in many, many ways, and we are grateful that they do. Please allow me to introduce our panelists for today's webinar. Elliot Harkavy, our body-worn camera technical specialist here at CNA, will provide a brief overview of the use of body-worn cameras in corrections. Lieutenant Dan Brodie is a 20-year veteran of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant Brodie has worked in the agency's correctional facilities as well as on patrol. He's a trained and certified computer forensics examiner and worked numerous high-profile cases on the national stage. Lieutenant Brodie has also worked on agency accreditation, planning and research, policy development, and currently serves as the Lieutenant over Internal Affairs as well as the administrator of the body-worn camera program. First Deputy Superintendent Scott Kelly of the New York State Department of Corrections has been working for 25 years in corrections. He has served as an officer, sergeant, lieutenant, and captain in his uniform titles. He was then appointed to the assistant director and later the director's position for the department's crisis intervention unit. He has been in his current position for a year now. He has also been the administrator of the department's body-worn camera initiative since its inception. Deputy Director Wes Kirkland joined the Florida Department of Corrections as a correctional officer in 1990. He was promoted through the security ranks, serving as sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, and colonel. He has experience in institutions with various specialized missions, including close management, inpatient mental health, and reception. In the central office, he served as a correctional services consultant, conducting security audits at all of the department's 50 major institutions. He served as the chief of the Bureau of Security Operations and most recently was promoted to Deputy Director of Institutional Operations. In this role, he oversees inmate population management, security policy, security audits, special teams and incident response, emergency management, institutional communications engineering, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and the ACA accreditation. I think we all know that so much of the research and discussion about body-worn cameras here and abroad has focused on law enforcement. Now it's time to turn our attention to how body-worn cameras can be used in other justice areas and to what we can learn from our colleagues in corrections. So I thank our presenters today for cooperating with us and for taking the time to relay some of their experiences with body-worn camera usage and implementation. Please permit me to make just a few other comments. This webinar is recorded for the benefit of others who may view it later on our website. There will be opportunities for questions at the end of the webinar, so please make your thoughts and questions known. I can assure you that others will appreciate hearing what you have to say. If you would like, you can use the chat utility to the right of your screen to enter your comments or questions, and we'll do our best to respond to your input. If you're not speaking on the webinar, please make sure to put your phone on mute by pressing *6 and to unmute it by pressing #6. If you're having any technical difficulties, please message the host by using the utility to the right of your screen, and we will help you to the best of our ability. Following the webinar, you will receive a request to evaluate it. Please complete the evaluation, and please give us your honest thoughts and recommendations. And please let us know what other topics you think we should cover on future webinars. Now, let me also thank Carrie Shelton, Elliot Harkavy, and Bridget Bryson at CNA, who do the background work to make sure these webinars go smoothly. Again, thank you for joining us today. I think we're in for some very interesting information. And Elliot, would you please start us off?
Thank you. Just to give a brief introduction about body-worn cameras in corrections, there's relatively not a lot of information out there. There hasn't been much research to date. We found 3 studies, 2 of which we'll be reviewing in the next couple of slides. And we here at CNA are working on a new NIJ study that's likely to be the first randomized controlled trial on body-worn cameras in corrections, and that we're doing in partnership with the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, and that's just getting underway, and results should be published sometime in 2021. There have been only a handful of media articles even, and it's interesting, I just saw one a few weeks ago, a very well-written article from a small-town newspaper that was talking about the benefits of body-worn camera for their local agencies, and they had indicated that their local jail that had just implemented body-worn cameras was, quote-unquote, one of the first jails in the country to do so. Now, that's probably based on the fact that there really are so few articles out there, so little information about what's happening with body-worn camera in corrections, that they had every reason to believe that from everyone that they've spoken to, they were one of the first, but the history on this goes back much longer than just very recently. That said, however, there has been a time lag in acceptance and deployment vis-a-vis patrol law enforcement in the field, as there hasn't been a sentinel event to move everyone towards deployment like we had with patrol, and there are a number of issues in terms of cost, in terms of the investment that's already been made in closed-circuit TV cameras in corrections, and frankly, as I was just talking about, the knowledge base that other people are doing this and other people are getting benefit from it. Without the proliferation of the news that, hey, this is good for corrections, other agencies don't know that this is something they should be considering. Now, in most cases, the initial adoption, especially the first documented case, the initial adoption was in special operations, cell extractions, transportation, other specialized units, but there are a lot of facilities now that have done full rollout. To go a little bit into the history, the first documented deployment was in 2012. The Charleston County Sheriff's Office deployed it with special operations. They had found that they weren't getting the video that they wanted from their closed-circuit TV, even though they had full coverage in the facility. There were a lot of ways that it could be blocked. There's also no audio in closed-circuit TV, and they wanted the audio and good video for documentation purposes and for training purposes and for analysis, to do after-action reviews and figure out how they could do things better. By deploying body-worn cameras, they were able to get better audio, better visual than the closed-circuit TVs, or having a member of their special operations team using a handheld video camera, and in fact they were able to do their special operations with one less person since they didn't need a person carrying a handheld video camera. The first documented multi-facility prison deployment, and probably the most thorough of the research studies to date, was in 2014 with the New Zealand Department of Corrections. They did a 6-month pilot across two units and their canine unit, and their findings were very interesting. A lot of the stuff that one would expect: increased officer and inmate safety, fewer uses of force. They were able to have video to support investigations of either internal misconduct by officers or prosecutions of misconduct by inmates. And it definitely provided training and development opportunities for the officers. But one of the most interesting things is they found that they were able to use the video for coaching inmates in how to behave better and what the inmates were doing that could be they could be doing better and getting more benefit from. But a key factor, and this is something that goes across body-worn cameras, or for that matter, any technology tool, the ability to get benefit, in this case the ability to modify behavior, is tied to how the camera is used, the policies, the procedures, and the tools and techniques for the review. We have a whole list here of other early adopters, and you'll see that our presenters, our fellow presenters, were all among the early adopters. Alameda County was the first documented U.S. Corrections multi-facility deployment. As I mentioned, newspaper articles or media articles. According to the media articles, the first media article of a full U.S. corrections facility to deploy to all corrections officer was Atlanta. So now that's commonly accepted as the first full deployment in a correction facility, but there may be others out there, and if your facility predates that, we'd love to hear about it. So the Florida Department of Corrections was the first pilot for body-worn cameras required by legislation in a state facility. New York Department of Corrections and Community Services holds a couple of firsts. The first documented multi-site state corrections pilot, the first body-worn camera grant for state corrections, and the first documented state corrections department to begin system-wide deployment. We also have a long and growing list of other corrections departments or agencies doing corrections. Many of these are sheriff's offices that do both patrol and corrections, but that have received grants for deployment in corrections. So that list is growing, and based on that list, based on the media articles and word of mouth, it is quite clear that the use of body-worn cameras in corrections is growing, and it will become more and more common over time. The future deployments can definitely benefit by the lessons learned from their predecessors, but in order to do that, we need to document what's happening and disseminate that knowledge and keep that knowledge base up to date as those requirements change. Body-worn cameras have certainly shown value, but research is definitely appropriate to help us really document what the size, scope, and scale of that value is. And one of the things to watch is, as criminal justice reform rolls out across the country, what will the impacts be of criminal justice reform on body-worn cameras in corrections? That will definitely be an interesting topic to watch. And with that, I will turn us over to Lieutenant Brodie of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office.
Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending where you are. Like you said, my name's Dan Brodie. I'm from the Alameda County Sheriff's Office in what is currently beautiful, sunny California. It was a little worse a couple days ago. If you don't know where we are in the East Bay area of the San Francisco Bay Area, which I'm sure you know is a very conservative, very supportive part of, area with law enforcement. we don't get any sort of oversight or challenges from the public at all. It's a bit of a joke. So we don't have corrections officers. We have fully certified California peace officers in our correctional facilities as well as out on patrol. For our implementation, not only do we have 1,000 sworn with cameras, but we have 200 civilians that have cameras, mostly your parking technicians or really anybody who's got contact with the public in a way where the camera is beneficial, and about 1,800 employees total. We are composed of 6 divisions, including detentions, corrections, our law enforcement area, as well as courts, coroner's bureau, and a number of other functions assigned to sheriff's offices. We currently only operate one jail, our Santa Rita jail. It has a 4,000 inmate capacity. It currently hovers around 2,500 inmates a day. But just until a few months prior, we did have 2 jails, and we had operated those 2 jails since about 1985. So I can answer a lot of questions about the multi-facility stuff, but at the moment, we only have one facility. Of our 1,000, about 400 of our sworn are assigned to detentions and corrections. The remaining 600 are spread out everywhere else. And for our law enforcement, we do have unincorporated areas like most sheriff's offices. We have a contract city, the city of Dublin, California. We have the Oakland International Airport and a number of hospitals. And we actually have a transit system, which there's actually 2 units assigned to the transit system. But what that's semi-notable is that transit system moves throughout different counties within the region, 2 counties actually, including our own, where our deputies sort of dip into while doing their work. So our cameras are all over the place there. Just a little history on the sheriff's office. We started out with a V-View system in December of 2012. We did a very slow rollout, and it was very slow unit to unit. It was initially very law enforcement focused, and corrections came online about somewhat last. Part of the problem with trying to hammer out exactly when in 2014 we had put cameras in jails is because of how we were doing the camera project. Each unit was buying and managing its own camera supply, and then we set up a centralized infrastructure that just could not keep up as each unit got more and more cameras. So I said right there, the infrastructure didn't keep up, and it was just incredibly unwieldy. So an example of that also is that we acquired about 816 cameras over the life of this body-worn system, but we never had more than about 500 at once, and that's important because, number one, we didn't have a central warranty. We didn't really track how old they were, so some were dead, and we don't know how many. And then the fact that I can't tell you how many cameras we had operating, I just have to say about, is because every unit, again, was tasked with maintaining inventory and maintaining stats. And we actually have 47 individual units. So you can understand that that's a little unwieldy. Cameras were often pooled in the area because they would break down. There may not be enough cameras for every single person in the unit, so they'd have to share every so often. And like I said, cameras were assigned to units. And the problem with that is that if deputies move from duty station to duty station, they have to check one camera out and put one camera back in, and it was just a pain. So we commissioned a body-worn camera evolution in December of 2015 to revamp our program. It was 2 parts. The first part was our policy, and our prior policy was very permissive. We were a should agency, as in you should activate your camera under these situations. But we had a little incident which made some news in San Francisco, and primarily the problem is that there was 12 cameras on scene, and not one camera was turned on. So we switched to a shall agency, and we enumerate many, many times where deputies shall turn their cameras on. We scoured around for best practices, and we got grant approval as well. So we feel that our policy is pretty sound. And like I said, we greatly increased our activation requirements, especially like out in law enforcement. It's almost any time you exit the vehicle, you're turning your camera on. We conducted a body-worn camera test and evaluation. It was done in mid of 2016. We conducted a test and evaluation with 7 vendors. We weighed on-premises versus cloud storage, especially since we're so spread out, just trying to overcome the previous infrastructure problems of having one server somewhere in the center to serve 47 individual units. And I am more than willing to share that with anybody offline. However, it is a little dated now. Technology moves quick, and some of the vendors don't exist anymore. and the rest of the vendors have significantly different offerings now. So our current program, we are an Axon agency. We have the Axon Officer Safety Plan for 1,000 sworn plus 200 camera onlys. That means we don't give tasers to the civilians, which is a good idea as far as I'm concerned. So 1,200 cameras total, 1,000 tasers. Everybody, including our sheriff, has an assigned body-worn camera. That eliminated all the issues with having it unit to unit, all the issues of people changing duty stations and having to turn it back in and get another one. Your camera is now a piece of assigned equipment, just like your gun, just like your OC spray, everything. We started that implementation in July of 2017, and we were fully implemented in December of 2017. We are on a 3-year retention period for all video. Every single video is minimally held for 3 years. That's thanks to our county council and our very litigious San Francisco Bay Area. At the moment, we are approaching 2.5 million videos. We generate about 5,000 videos a day. We have about 46 terabytes of video, which translates to 28.31 years of video up there right now, and we're not even at 3 years. That'll be December of 2020, so I'm interested to see where we get there. For everything else that's evidence-related or use of force-related, those retention periods are tied to the case themselves, so we may maintain them for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, depending on how that goes. We chose cloud centralization for our size and how spread out we are, and also availability of that video. We are heavily into auto activation. Our cars turn on the cameras when you turn the lights on. The cameras go on when tasers are turned on, and we are going to be getting the holster system for when you draw your gun. We actually tested the old one. We didn't like it very much, but we know their new one is much better, so we'll be getting that soon. We run a 30-second pre-buffer without audio. This is a choice that we made to capture those 30 seconds before the contact. Some differences between corrections and LE. Well, we found you have a lot more use in correctional settings, about 40 activations a day on average for our deputies in correctional settings. And that is an average. There are deputies that are extremely prolific, have 80, 85 activations a day. And some of our more seasoned deputies, if you will, a little slower to adopt the body camera program, may only activate about 20 a day. But still, it's a good number of activations even then. We run the cameras. We have privacy for searches and medical. So if you're doing a strip search, we don't, of course, film the strip search. But we do try, if we can, on a strip search to get a sound only. So if we have 2 deputies available, one deputy will stand off to the side or just outside the room with their camera on, so they're getting the audio and the video of a wall, while the other deputy is conducting the strip search. And if something jumps off, of course, then they can go in and deal with it. We also have the 30-second buffer running on the deputy conducting the search. So if nothing happens, of course, that's lost. But if something happens, we can capture that video as well. I don't have it on here, but we do run our recorders during all visitation with the public and during visitation with attorneys only for the staging, removing, et cetera. We, of course, don't stand by and get the attorney visit. And we have a bit of a difference between pill call and medical appointments. So pill call to all the doors, or if they come down to get their pills, it's expressly noted in the rules and regulations that they're not to discuss any medical issues there, so we run the cameras for that. If the inmate is having a medical appointment with the nurse and the deputy is inside the office, we do tell them to turn their cameras off for the privacy there. Again, 30-second pre-buffer is running. But if the deputy is standing outside of the room, just like if you went to the doctor and you have that little HIPAA barrier where you're supposed to stand behind for privacy, deputy standing outside, supervising a line of inmates, we run the cameras just to make sure everything's okay, but we're not inside there expressly recording that medical conversation. We do not activate during our classification interviews to protect all the sensitive information there, but we do, all the class officers do have cameras, and they will use them for anything other than the interview, moving around, stuff like that. For the difference for when to activate, out on the street, so it's somewhat easier because you have, you're in your car, you're at Starbucks getting coffee versus you're talking to a member of the public. It's easy to remember when to turn it on and off. In corrections, we had to sort of bring that in. The when to activate is anytime you're going to be contacting an inmate, you're going to be supervising an inmate, or anything that's going to be of use or of interest of recording, we have them turning the cameras on for that. We find with law in the jails, with logs, assignments, documentation of where you are and what you're doing, it's really easy to find the particular involved staff. Say, for instance, an inmate says, oh, it was a deputy wearing a gray shirt, which we all wear, and he talked to me at this time and date at this area. We can narrow that down really easy because of the controllability of a jail versus out on the street where it's, oh, it was a ball cop. Okay, that's 2/3 of us. Trying to figure out who interacted with in the public is a lot harder. For utilization, we activate upon any contact with the inmate at all, including all of our interviews with them, counts, other than class interviews, all of our other interviews, all of our counts, all of our general observation checks every hour or every half hour or every 15 minutes. The camera's on for those. Supervision of rec time, supervision of meals. Anytime we're distributing anything like commissary or any items out, especially we have it on for refusals for medical or for court. The federal government, we have a contract with the U.S. Marshals, and they love the fact that we have all the refusals captured on body-worn camera, and they can take them, and when they go to the court and say that they weren't provided with opportunity for something, there's a nice, plain, clean video showing them lying. And something that we put forward is to have you consider assigning it to all of the staff. We have mandatory overtime program. We have staff rotations. We have transportation units moving between facilities. It makes that just so much easier so that you don't have to pool the cameras, assign them in and out of the units. It's just a piece of equipment for every deputy. So multiple facilities and size considerations. Prior to 2019, we operated the two facilities. We had a 900-bed jail in Oakland. As before, issuing to individuals instead of to the individual into the units helped so much because we moved detentions corrections staff between the two, not just on transportation, but to help cover or whatever else was going on. And it was just nice to be able to have that piece of equipment assigned to that deputy moving between the two different facilities. Central management and inventory is an absolute must for us having the two facilities. Just having one point of contact to deal with the implementation between the two and all the other units is just so much easier. You can record the transfers between the facilities. We do have surveillance in our transport vans, but our body-worn cameras are activated as well for offloading, onloading, everything else. Just, again, every incident, every interaction you have that may be of interest is good to have captured on video. A big thing for us, space and bandwidth considerations. Two facilities just adds on to that as well, or multiple facilities, I should say, just adds on to that as well. We actually had to go out and get a separate IT line in for our Axon system. Most of your IT infrastructure is focused on the downstream, getting internet, if you will, to you, not really focused on putting stuff up on the internet. And with the amount of cameras we have and the docking of the cameras and uploading the video, we were choking the pipe. We actually are forced to use the county IT infrastructure. The county IT is our provider. So we had to break away from them, go out to AT&T and source a few lines at our big duty stations like our main jail, our patrol duty station, and have our own dedicated line just to get video up to the internet fast and not choke everything up. So again, some lessons learned for us. We have that dedicated bandwidth and connections. Just don't want to choke every other person that's using the internet. We have a dedicated dock charging area based on how the Axon cameras work. We have a ready room at our main jail and at our patrol duty station where they can check out items that day, like check out charged radios, check out batons if they needed them, things like that. So in that area, we have all of the dedicated docks where the staff will go in, they'll dock their camera, it charges, it uploads, and they just check it back out before they head out. We suggest issuing to individual staff. It just works well for us, and we have history with the prior model of not doing that, and we don't like it very much. We absolutely do not worry about annotating the videos at all in the agency. Again, in the correctional facility, it doesn't really matter because we're able to find where you are and locate that video. And corrections doesn't benefit from the street side where we have MDTs, we have automatic CAD RMS tagging. So we, as the agency, we don't force our staff to annotate every single video. We tell them if there's one that you know is of interest, particular use of force, go in and annotate it to make it easy to find. But for all those mundane contacts, doing a count, doing a general observation at 2 p.m., You don't have to log in and write count at 2 p.m. or checked at 2:30. Just put the video up. We can find it if we need it, because at 4,000 videos agency-wide, 4,000 or 5,000 videos agency-wide a week or a day, that's a lot of annotation. We do allow our staff to review the video before writing reports. We just found that discrepancies, it's human nature to have some errors, and discrepancies looked horrible between the written report and the actual video. And me being in internal affairs, I use the video a lot to get rid of complaints. And most of the time I find that the public has stored the memory in their head wrong. And so we use that to protect ourselves and say, no, everything was right on video. You're just remembering it wrong. And so we try to prevent that on our side, where the deputy's writing the report and they are honestly remembering it wrong. Nothing against them. They don't remember everything that the video shows. So we say, watch the video first, then write your report. Same thing with critical incidents for us. If there's a critical incident, they're allowed to watch the video with audio and their representative before giving any sort of statement. We suggest considering a very strong policy position on activation and enforce it. Our sheriff meets with every single member of the sheriff's office, minimally once every 2 years. But there's a lot of different meetings and videos that are put out where the sheriff gets this message out constantly to all the members of the agency. And the sheriff says point blank and very bluntly that he will fire you if you do not activate your camera. And he has fired somebody for not activating their camera. So that helped a lot with implementation and adoption of the program. We suggest training from day one. We have an academy. We have a large regional academy here, and we issue cameras the minute they start. And we start training that muscle memory of activating the camera automatically during scenarios, during everything else. And we find that it's very helpful. We work with our district attorney's office, and our district attorney office, it has an evidence.com installation so that our body-worn camera information can remain digital throughout the process. So much easier than having to burn DVDs and CDs and provide that off. We just move the case over in evidence.com. The DA is able to use it. It is so useful, both law enforcement and on the correctional side. And we find the system, the training, the time pays for itself in complaints and in lawsuits. As in internal affairs, I'm able to see all of the work that was attached, or all of the benefit that came out of getting us a robust body-worn camera program. It's a little odd that I, as in an IA role, would also have the body-worn camera program, but it's because I was the body-worn administrator prior to that. And like so many roles in law enforcement, it's assigned to you as a person, and it just follows you until you retire. So I'm sure I'll be the administrator for many years to come. But it's been nice being an IA. I can see the direct results of that body-worn camera program. So I'll be available for questions, and thank you all for listening, and now I'll hand it off to First Deputy Superintendent Scott Kelly.
Deputy Superintendent, New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. Before I get into the couple of slides that I have, I'll just give a quick overview of our policy and kind of where we started at and where we're at today. 2017, we started our deployment after an abbreviated T&E of a couple of camera platforms based on just some things were going on in the department. We felt it was a good time to get cameras into our facilities that currently didn't have any or a robust fixed camera system. So, because we run 52 facilities across the state of New York, totaling today about 43,000 inmates. Probably at the time of the inception of the program, it was closer to 50,000 inmates. And our facilities date from 200 plus years old to about 25 years old. So they're very different architecturally, you know, as they're a sign of the times as they were built. So our very first facility we instituted body cameras in was Clinton Correctional Facility, also known as Dannemora, which those may recall was we had a very well-advertised escape back in 2015. So it made sense to start there. And there were also a lot of allegations coming out of the inmate population at that time. So we started at that site, and we're currently in a total of 8 sites at approximately 1,600 cameras. Unlike the way Dan's department does it, we issue cameras to posts, not people. we basically took a look at our facilities and made a determination where we would get the most usage and the most footage from the camera that would assist us in investigations for either incidents, allegations, so on, et cetera. In a jail like Clinton, there is a total of 900 line security staff members, so it would really just would have been cost prohibitive to issue cameras to every sworn officer within each of those facilities. We have two very different policies when it comes to how we govern the camera program. In our female facilities, it is a PREA-based policy, which basically our staff that are equipped with cameras, which are most of our security staff in those facilities, their direction is anytime they are not being covered by a fixed camera, they're to activate their body camera. And what we found out actually very early on was our PREA allegations at those facilities decreased by about 50%, just based on the activation of body cameras. The inmates are very aware when they're being videotaped. We don't utilize our cameras in covert mode. We want everybody to know that the camera is active. It really just saves baseless allegations. And our male facilities, it's more of a incident-based type activation. And what we've done is, as Dan said, when they move to a shall type system, that's basically where we've been from the beginning. Early on, we had facilities writing local policies governing how the camera program was to be administered, and we've now centralized that and included it in one of our departmental directives. But I'll quickly go through the types of instances where a correction officer, sergeant, or lieutenant are expected to activate their body-worn camera. So direction by a sergeant or above, use or expected use of force during cell room extractions and their entries, use or expected use of chemical agents, unauthorized inmate activity where it can be reasonably expected that security violations may result or where physical force may be necessary, movement of inmates from special housing units or mental health units during general movement of inmates, responding to emergency situations, and that's any type of emergency, pat frisks of inmates, including program, recreation, mess hall, gym runs, etc., inmate escorts that are not routine, inmate transports as directed by the facility watch commander or higher ranking, at the discretion of the wearer if they believe it would be beneficial to activate. Incident-based activations are required regardless of whether a fixed camera system is present in the area or not. And as Dan stated, part of that is, one, frequently those fixed cameras don't come with audio, and two, we found at times where the fixed camera really tells a different story than the body-worn camera after the fact. And we actually had an incident very recently where the body-worn camera, once that footage was reviewed, the officer's actions were completely justified, where during an initial review of the fixed camera, it didn't appear that way. So that's kind of how we administer the cameras in our department. As far as recording, maybe something that would be considered a breach of HIPAA or during a strip frisk, basically, if we believe that it's beneficial to have that camera recording, then what we do is we have step measures to ensure that video footage is protected. And obviously, every one of these platforms offers the ability to audit any review of the camera footage. So that's kind of the way we do with that. And as far as staff reviewing their camera footage prior to report writing, we don't allow that. We rewrote our use of force policy within the past couple of years and specifically precluded staff from reviewing any camera footage prior to, because what we found was, and we were really having a hard time in the courts when we were getting sued, was that frequently our paperwork was all the same across the staff members either involved or witness to an incident. The judges, and I mean very much the same, to the point, it was, the same exact observation. So the judges basically said that although we were all reviewing the same incident, they were finding it hard to believe that just based on, you know, socioeconomic upbringing, education, et cetera, that we wouldn't see things a little bit different, write it a little bit differently. So we insert a narrative with our footage after the fact, basically stating that, you know, eyewitness testimony is generally the worst testimony out there, where the camera is unemotional and exact, and you know, just prosecutors and judges and advocates, et cetera, need to understand that very rarely will the eyewitness testimony mirror exactly the camera footage, and that's kind of the way we handle that as far as when the report writing is being done. So as far as correctional policy considerations, obviously I talked about our directive. We had to rewrite or create directives once we centralized to incorporate the use of body-worn camera, because previous cameras were handheld and they were usually brought on site after the fact. So they weren't on site for the inception of the incident throughout. So, as stated, we built off our handheld camera directive and just created sections for the body-worn cameras, and then we also added in unusual incident directives and use of force directives a piece regarding how the body-worn camera would be administered, utilized, et cetera. Ensuring compliance with policy and methods to audit. It's very difficult in the correctional setting. There are so many times where an officer is required to activate their body-worn camera, especially when I talked about those times where we could reasonably assume that there might be an incident. Unlike street law enforcement, where the call to service is documented either through dispatch, things of that nature, we frequently pat frisk inmates and have other types of interactions with the inmate where if we don't recover contraband, if it doesn't turn into a force incident, there is no incident, so we don't have the ability to say, officer so-and-so should have activated at this time but didn't, because we don't document every single random pat frisk we do. You know, we don't document every interaction we have with every inmate. So compliance, it's, you know, we're working on just some auditing abilities by our higher level security supervisors to ensure compliance. We create a lot of video in New York State Corrections just based on our directive. So even that is a task in itself to really audit the video that comes in. To give you an idea, we started early on. We use local solutions. We're not networked in our 8 sites. So every site has a standalone solution. Early on at Clinton, we were using 49 terabyte servers. We're now up to 194 terabyte servers because we were filling up our 49 terabyte servers, and that was with a 90-day retention time. So we really generate a lot of video within the department. So we're working on compliance. Training is a big piece of that. And as Dan talked about, you know, some of your more seasoned officers, our newer officers that are coming into these sites, this is what they know. So it's easier, I believe, to you know, ensure compliance with these new staff members because they've kind of grown up in this world of you know, everything's on video and the technology, where our older staff, it truly they worked in facilities where, you know, their memorandum was what occurred during the incident, and that was a standalone you know, product. So, and allowing access to recordings without divulging security protocols, that is, unlike street law enforcement, again, where there's the understanding that really any action by the officer is likely being recorded, whether it be by a security camera at a local business, or as everybody has seen on really any newscast, as soon as there's an incident, everybody opens up a cell phone and starts recording law enforcement. In corrections, it isn't like that, and corrections functions the way it does, and very well. We're able to maintain order because we have some tried and true security protocols, and the way we respond to incidents, the way we maneuver throughout our facilities, the way we allow movement throughout our facilities, that as we're, you know, weighing the benefits of transparency, you know, with the body cameras and allowing the public, you know, access really to our facilities to dispel rumors and to really debunk allegations, we also have to ensure that we're not divulging these protocols that would then prove to be a threat to the safety and security of the facility, because obviously once those methods that we use to respond to incidents and things of that nature become public knowledge, we have a population that will do their best and in some way, shape, or form try to use those policies against us to affect whether it be assaults, criminal activity, or just really even just, you know, institutional rule violations that we have to protect ourselves from. So lessons learned from the pilot to rollout. The logistics involved in maintaining a system at multiple sites. As I said, we have 52 facilities, and currently our two furthest facilities, if anybody's familiar with New York, Buffalo, which is out by Ohio, we actually have a facility out there that has a body-worn camera program, as well as we go all the way down to New York City and all the way up to the Canadian border, so several hundred miles between each of those sites. So maintaining those systems, and what we've done at this point is, although I administer at the central office level the program and I'm really just a point of contact for everybody involved, we've utilized staff at the rank of lieutenant or higher, based on what the superintendent of the facility has for staffing needs and available staff, to really locally administer the program and provide feedback to me regarding whether it be camera breakage, storage issues, compliance issues, et cetera. But we are actually looking at possibly moving towards a networked solution, which makes it you know, much easier to manage from the from a central office level when it's not having to, you know, report to each site. Maintenance right now, because we're not networked, and it was really for the same issues that Dan talked about. You know, our IT infrastructure we share with you know, all of the state law enforcement agencies within New York. So our concern was if we started networking, you know, we have the New York State Police and DHSES and things, agencies of that nature, where we could really start impacting the pipe as far as their information flow. So, you know, we're actually doing the same, you know, investigation as to how we can, you know, network without, you know, impacting our sister agencies within the state. And the other side of that is maintenance is on site for every one of these sites that have body-worn cameras. We actually require on-site tech support, other than the simplest of issues where the officers that are, we have an officer assigned to hand out, download, so on, et cetera. It's a single officer, usually in a central area within the facility, that handles all the downloading of video, as well as the cataloging of who is receiving a camera and such. We don't task our line staff with actual review of footage. But if it's more than just a control alternate delete type issue, we require tech support on site, because everything has to be done with thumb drive, with you know, wireless and Bluetooth type hardware, in order, if it requires any sort of involvement of the vendor itself, who's based out of Texas right now. So we're looking to mitigate the time it takes to maintain these, because sometimes it can be prolonged, and obviously it always seems to be at those times when you really need a piece of video is when you're having the biggest problem with your servers. So and you know, that goes to the storage capacity requirements and retention. You know, I spoke on that a short time ago, that, you know, we started off with what we thought was very robust servers at 49 terabytes, and you know, we've now evolved to 4 times the size of those servers based on what our department needs are. And they're fairly new to us, so I can say right now we have plenty of space, but that's at a single site. So each site that we're doing, and we actually had to retrofit 2 of our earlier sites because the servers just were full and they just kept on crashing on us. So, I would say, overestimate the storage space that you think you need if you are going to do a local solution, because I think as we found out, that especially in the correctional setting, there's just so much more opportunity to turn that camera on, and for a prolonged period of time. There's some of these incidents happen frequently within our department. Also, a fight amongst multiple inmates, the recording doesn't stop when the fight's over. You have all your escorts after the fact, your confinement of the inmates, and we're running multiple cameras because it's usually multiple staff members involved in those through the entire of these incidents, and some of those can be an hour long, and that's really a fairly common occurrence after an incident. It's there's just a lot of things that we have to do, and we keep the cameras rolling for the entire period, because that also tends to be when you'll get a lot of your allegations from your inmates. So just having the ability to refer right back to the footage and say, no, this clearly didn't happen, or in those cases where it did happen, then we address that accordingly also. Obviously, if you go to a networked or a cloud-based solution, which we're investigating right now, it gives us the opportunity to take to then just play, pay-as-you-go type deal, where if you start off with one solution and you realize it's not enough, pretty much any of these vendors out there will have the ability to just increase the amount of storage. So you're not paying for anything you don't want, but you're getting exactly what you need on the network side of it, where it's much more of a math problem on the local side. So I'm going to hand it on over to Wes. As stated, any questions for us, and obviously after the fact, I believe they'll be providing some contact information, and offline, any questions that any of the attendees have, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Scott. This is Wes Kirkland from the Florida Department of Corrections, and I'm going to talk today about our pilot that we did at Sumter Correctional Institution, which is in the central part of the state, with just the body cameras for uniformed officers. So, as previously mentioned, we were specifically funded by the legislature to implement body cameras at Sumter Correctional Institution. The Sumter at the time had a lot of allegations against staff from inmates surrounding abuse, and they have a unique population where they have youthful offenders and adults at the same facility, but kept separate by housing units. So they were getting a lot of attention from news media and legislators. So we implemented the body cameras. So some of the metrics that we wanted to review during this pilot were to determine if allegations of abuse or misconduct, staff assaults, and then also use of force incidences would decrease as a result of the body cameras. Based on the data that we gathered over that year, it did not have any positive impact on those areas. Currently in Florida, we do have fixed wing camera systems, as previously mentioned, and we also have a requirement of handheld video recorders during a use of force incident as well. But so we didn't see a positive decrease in those allegations and those metrics that we were measuring to decide whether or not we wanted to try to roll this out to more institutions. We did receive a little bit of positive feedback from the institutional leadership where the body cameras were beneficial for those unexpected events, especially during visitation. Again, a lot of allegations coming from visitors. However, there were concerns raised by our legal department about the rights of the visitors from being recorded, and then also the potential inadvertently recording confidential information that would violate both the inmates and the staff privacy as related to medical treatment, searches, that kind of those kind of things. So We made the decision not to implement the body cameras to any other institutions, and once the funding was exhausted for that year, we decided not to continue it at Sumter as well. As previously mentioned, the cost of the cloud storage and the evidence.com, we were using Axon body cameras, and the results of the pilot, and again, the concerns that we had as an agency, we decided not to implement any further. One thing I wanted to talk about is on the next slide, is the body camera and the taser weapon integrated pilot test that we started in August of 2018 at one facility. This particular facility had historical high rates of staff assaults, reactionary use of force incidences, and so we worked with Axon to implement both the taser and body camera together. As previously mentioned by one of the other speakers, when you draw the taser from the holster, it automatically activates the body camera. The metrics that we wanted to measure at this one facility were staff assaults, reactionary use of force incidences, and allegations of excessive force. The facility that we picked has, it's all under the umbrella of one warden, but there's actually 2 units that are located on the same property. Each of those units hold roughly 1,500 inmates each. And they had very similar inmate population, with also a lot of long-term segregation inmates would be sent to this facility to reintegrate back in the general population. So just had a lot of serious incidences that have occurred at this institution over the years. So what we decided to do is utilize the main unit to implement the tasers and body cameras, and then measure that over a 90-day period to see if the metrics, if we saw a positive decrease in those areas at the main unit versus the annex. We looked at the data from both facilities over the previous year. Their numbers of reactionary use of force, staff assaults, allegations were very similar in numbers. So when we implemented the taser and body camera at the main unit, we saw a huge decrease in these areas, and again, that was the only difference between the 2 units. So it was very significant areas. So staff assaults, you'll see we saw a 42% reduction. Reactionary use of force incidences, we saw a 51% reduction, and allegations of excessive force, we saw a 70% reduction. And again, the only thing we did at the main unit was just implement the taser and body camera. Again, similar population makeup, and then also similar numbers from the previous year. We initially started out with a 90-day pilot. We worked with Axon. They agreed to extend that pilot out. We've now implemented the tasers and body cameras at the adjacent unit, and we did that probably about a month or 2 ago. So we're looking at those metrics now to see if we again see some positive impacts there at the adjacent unit as related to the taser and body cameras. The department is currently in the process of implementing tasers and body cameras at other facilities. We're working right now with the vendor and working out the logistics of that. But the one reason I wanted to talk through that is because we saw we certainly don't want the weapon, the taser, without the body camera. So it was very important that we had both. We have a very strict policy in place for staff and when they're allowed to use the taser, but having it integrated with the body camera and having that body camera come on immediately when that taser is drawn from the holster is a huge benefit. And so if anyone wishes to have further information about this particular pilot, then just please let me know through the information that will be provided at the end of the presentation. I know that was kind of quick. We're running tight on time, so I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Mr. Cauldron. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, and thanks everybody. I thought those were all very informative presentations. So we have had actually a number of questions come in, and I'll just say at this point that far more questions than we can attend to in a short amount of time that we have, since we're already past the hour. So I think what I'll do is I'll go through a couple of the questions, and I'll ask our panelists to respond to them if they can. But what CNA will do is we will respond to each of these questions within the next week or so and send them back to the requesters. So we'll do our best to answer everything that we can. Some of them are very technological that I don't think we could get into right now. Some of them are rather vendor specific, and I think we should handle that offline anyway. So just please trust us that we will attempt to respond to all of these questions at some point in time, and I'll just toss a few out for now just to keep things going for a few minutes. So one of the questions we have, and I think it was somewhat addressed by the presenters, concerns the privacy of inmates. And the question is, are you always allowed to record the inmates? I think clearly the answer to that is no, but maybe let's just start with Mr. Kelly maybe and just see, how do you view the privacy issue in your policy?
Strip frisks, things of that nature, medical appointments. That said, as I spoke on earlier, if the evidentiary value is going to outweigh the intrusive nature of the recording, or we believe it is going to, then a supervisor or even an officer at a point, if it's during, I'll go back to a strip frisk, they can record because the access to the footage is very limited. We have tiered access, and it's our upper level supervisors up to and including the superintendent. And the audit trail that comes on each of these platforms, again, is excellent, regardless of who you choose. So we can clearly monitor who's actually reviewing, copying, et cetera, on the video footage. In our female facilities, like, we will record in a bathroom, but all of our showers to be compliant with PREA, they have 2 shower curtains, and the inmate can't enter the main area of the bathroom in any state of undress. So there's policies on the inmate side that also protect their privacy to a level. And most of the other areas of our correctional institutions, there's really no expectation to privacy, as fixed cameras have shown us time and time again, So we kind of piggyback on that.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkland, anything you want to say in addition to that?
We already currently video record any type of shower of the inmate after a use of force if chemical agents were used on them. However, the shower is done in privacy. We try not to video record any of the private areas of the body. The fixed wing cameras we also have in our confinement units. We also have audio that's attached to the fixed wing camera system. During a post-use of force exam, the actual medical examination is video recorded by the handheld camera through a door with a window, so you can't hear what's being said, but you can video record it and make sure that everything's being done appropriate as far as with the escort and all. So yes, we're very, very similar.
Okay, appreciate it. I'm going to go to another question, which I think is an interesting one, and Lieutenant Brodie, I'll toss this one towards you. It's what is your procedure when videos are requested from the public, and do you charge for them? So have you faced this issue, and then we'll ask the others.
Absolutely. So California is under some body camera scrutiny as well. There's a Senate bill, SB 1421, and Assembly Bill 748, which is trying to force us into releasing body camera video. We are a bit of an outlier for our state. We refuse to release any body-worn camera video. We exempt it under California Public Records Act, with the exception of the videos that we are now forced to reproduce, such as officer-involved shootings or critical incidents, any use of force that involves a serious bodily injury, which the legislature was kind enough to not fully define for us. So we just say anytime you're hospitalized and that's admitted, not just getting it medically cleared, we have to release that video. And then also there's two relating to internal affairs, sexual assaults by peace officers, and any case where a peace officer is dishonest in the investigation of a crime. But to answer that question, as far as the ones that we do release, there is a very low-level court decision that was made, and I'm not a lawyer, and our county counsel hates when I use these terms like low-level, but as we know, watching Miranda in custody, it doesn't really get decided till it gets up in those bigger courts that matter. So, but right now, there's a case out of Hayward, California, where they were authorized to charge specifically for the tools and the time needed to redact videos. The problem with that, as far as the sheriff's office is concerned, is that when we have a video that's being requested by, like, the mother of an inmate who died in custody, we aren't comfortable giving them a bill for $3,000 of time and energy to redact. So while we can charge for the videos, we choose not to charge based on the optics. And just real quick, I want to touch on the last topic about the privacy. Our agency's stance is very firm on anytime a deputy is able to be somewhere, the video can be on, with the exception of strip searches where we know we are obviously going to be asking somebody to undress, or a medical interview, and same thing out in the law enforcement side. If we're at a hospital and they're conversing with the doctor, we don't specifically record that. But other than those, anytime a deputy can legally be somewhere, we are recording. And one thing that we do capture, and we get a little heat for it, but we believe in it, is we capture when the deputy is going to do a 15-minute check on a meeting between an inmate and their attorney. We may capture a very brief moment of their conversation, but it's nothing different than what we capture when we walk by to hear it anyway. And we like to show that we aren't, in fact, hanging out next to doors like we're being accused of and listening in and everything else. So that's our stance on that.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Kelly, have you dealt with the issue of public release of videos at all?
We haven't actually at this time, and I spoke earlier on just the protection of the security protocol. So we have a very good FOIL policy in place. Our counsel office leads the charge on any of those requests for release. We obviously, when we went into this initiative with body cameras, we actually reached out to like PLS and some inmate advocacy organizations for their support, which they were very supportive. And we haven't really even gotten a lot of requests from the advocacy groups. I believe they're just, they're happy that we're using the camera footage, the ability it gives us to more thoroughly investigate allegations, but we treat it the same, the request for body camera footage, the same as our fixed cameras, and each one is weighed on its own based on what the camera was capturing and, intentionally and what the camera was capturing unintentionally. And there are times that we release them, but we really, we haven't gotten a lot of pushback following our FOIL requests.
Okay, appreciate that. Mr. Kirkland, anything to add to this conversation about release of videos?
No, sir. Very, very similar. We have a very robust public records laws in Florida. We do get requests for fixed wing video camera footage, and because of that footage and what it actually captures about the layout and security protocols and things of that nature, we don't release those. And we would do the same thing with any body camera footage. More than likely, that footage is going to capture any type of emergency response plans that we have in place to respond to any type of an emergency, escorting procedures, again, compound layouts, dorm layouts, things of that nature. So we would, those would be denied as well.
Okay, appreciate it. Lieutenant Brodie, this is going to come back to you. There's a question, a very quick question. Do you know what the average length of, individual recordings are, for an officer?
Oh, that varies a lot. They
Sure.
can be really short, from just peeking in a cell to see what's going on during a count time or during a 15-minute isolation check, to 30 minutes to an hour if it's a significant event. So I don't. It's kind of hard to answer.
I understand. So here's an interesting question that I really can't imagine what the answer would be, but I want to throw it out there. Why do you use pre-record without audio in the States? I always assumed that was just a limitation of the vendors, but does anybody have a thought about that? And Elliot, I'll come to you last.
I could answer just from Alameda County first, because we actually dealt with this on our test and evaluation program. Our prior instance of EVU had no function. We tried initially to go with a minute of audio and video, finding that was just way too long. And then with the 30 seconds, the issue with the audio comes more out of law enforcement. And the reason is because we found that, like, say a deputy's in a car eating lunch and somebody walks up to them to ask them a question, and let's say that went south. Well, being a former deputy and a former actual law enforcement officer, now I just sit at a desk all day, I would have said under my breath something to the effect of, "What the hell are you bothering me for?" Or, something generally nice. With the window up, nobody hears it, it's just for me, and then roll the window down and then converse with them. If that went sideways, what we didn't want to have happen was somebody who doesn't understand what we do judging and saying, "Oh, look, obviously their mindset is they're angry and blah, blah, blah." It's like, no, because I just have fresh Jack in the Box. I don't really want to be bothered right now. So we found that not capturing the audio allowed us to capture what was going on video, see that you're eating or whatever you're doing that's normal, and then turning the audio on and dealing with the event.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Kelly, any thoughts about this?
Docs actually at this time does not use pre-record, and we did it strictly for a battery consumption issue, because unlike the street deputy who has the ability to maybe plug into the charger within the car, and again, just the sheer volume of recording that some of our staff do, logistically, because we deploy cameras out of a central location within each of the facilities, usually up towards the administrative side of the facility, because that's where we protect all our hardware. Getting a camera to replace the one that the batteries died on can sometimes prove to be very time-consuming. It's burdensome to staff, as well as that time period that you don't have that camera because the battery is dying or has died. As Murphy says, that's when you're going to have that incident.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. Good. Appreciate it.
Can you hear me? This is John.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted, before we get maybe cut off by the Citrix software, it's possible. I'm John Marksick. I'm with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I got on a little late because of technical issues, but I do want to let people know that the Bureau of Justice Assistance is now working towards finalizing its solicitation for 2020 for body-worn cameras. And as in the past, correctional organizations are eligible to participate. It was originally written for law enforcement, but as Elliot pointed out, many correctional agencies and sheriff's departments are now deploying them in correctional settings in jail. So just real quickly, keep an eye out for the funding announcement. If you go to bja.ojp for Office of Justice Programs, .usdoj for U.S. Department of Justice /funding, the word funding, you'll see our open solicitations, and you'll also be given an opportunity to subscribe to funding notifications. So you can look at the upcoming body-worn camera grant as well as other grant offerings from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Thanks, Chip. I just wanted to get that in in case we got cut off for technical issues. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, John. I'm glad you could join us. I'm going to just field one last question, and then I think we'll close it up. And that question came from somebody asking if there was going to be funding available for research on body-worn cameras and corrections. And my response to that is I think there will be. As a matter of fact, CNA is right now launching a study of body-worn cameras in an adult jail in Virginia. So there is funding. I would just keep an eye open for the National Institute of Justice funding opportunities announcements. That's probably the most likely place where you would get a chance to do that. But I know that BJA is interested in body-worn camera programs that include research components. So if you're applying for a body-worn camera grant, you might consider dedicating some of those funds that you apply for to actually doing some evaluation work, and that would increase the amount of research that we're looking for on this issue. So with that,
Chip, I will chime in a little bit on that real quickly. As Chip said, we do encourage agencies to include research or even evaluation of their own programs. But the robust research we're not supporting through this program. This program is predicated on the purchase of body-worn cameras. And essentially there's what we call the $2,000 per camera metric, which means you can request up to $2,000 per camera in federal funds, and that could cover any allowable expense. Obviously, the cost of the cameras, but anything ancillary to that, as long as it's not storage. And so a lot of times people will fund training, they'll fund staffing enhancements, and they fund research. There is a 50% match, meaning dollar for dollar match to the federal funds, which can be cash or in kind. So if you were to match on research, that would be fine, either self-evaluation or a more robust research design. We have been trying to shift the funding from BJA to cover things other than body-worn cameras as more and more agencies are getting them. However, we are tied to the legislative budget that we get and the legislative language that goes with that. So we've been trying to sell that broadening of the program, have not yet been successful, but there are avenues for research if you want to integrate that within your request for cameras.
Okay, thank you, John. So with that, let me again.
Chip, this is Elliot. I just wanted to say, in answer to the prior question about the pre-record, I wanted to let people know that we're actually going to have 2 small articles about that upcoming in our newsletters under the Technology Corner heading in our newsletter. So keep an eye out for that. Okay,
so maybe, Bridget, you can send a note to everybody here just saying how to get access to that newsletter. Thank you, Elliot. So with that, let me just thank Dan Brodie, Scott Kelly, Wes Kirkland, Elliot Harkavy for their preparation and for the delivery of what I think is some very compelling information about body-worn cameras and corrections. We had a very large audience today, and I'm thankful to everybody who participated, and especially to those who hung on with us for the better part of a half an hour after the ending time. So I thank you all very much. And please, when you get your evaluation, if you're interested in more topics around body-worn cameras and corrections or other justice agencies, please let us know, and we'll do our best to put that material together. Carrie and Bridget, thank you both very much for all the behind-the-scenes work that you did today. Appreciate it.